Hi everyone, thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Julie Kruger and I'm the owner of Kruger Immigration Law. Kruger Immigration Law is a boutique immigration law firm headquartered in Buffalo, New York, and we have a by appointment office only in Toronto, Ontario. And our firm, we focus our practice on family immigration, business immigration. We handle removal defense cases, citizenship and naturalization cases, basically any kind of immigration case. We love helping our clients achieve their dreams without borders. You can reach us on the web at www.krugerimmigrationlaw.com. You can call me at 716-393-9878, and you can email me at julie@krugerimmigrationlaw.com. We offer a free case evaluation, so if you have an immigration matter that you'd like to speak with me about, please give us a call or email me. I'd be happy to speak with you. We're really excited to be here today because we have invited Matthew Pelkey of Colligan Law here to talk with us about how to start a business in the United States. We receive a lot of questions from clients and people contacting our office for the first time about that they want to start a business in the U.S., that they have an idea, or they already have a business outside the U.S. and they want to expand their business into the U.S. And we can help with the immigration part of the process, applying for the L visa or the E visa. But we don't handle the business registration and the other legal services that go along with creating a business in the United States. So Matthew is here to talk with us about that, and we're so glad that he is here.
My name is Matthew Pelkey. I am a partner at Colligan Law here in Buffalo, New York. Our firm centers around servicing entrepreneurs and startups from idea to exit. That includes working with early ideation all the way through to publicly traded companies, labor law, employment, tax and turnaround, and litigation as well. I can be reached at mpelkey@colliganlaw.com or on our website, www.colliganlaw.com. Our phone number is 716-885-1150, or you can follow us on Twitter at Colligan Law.
So welcome, Matthew. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
And so Matthew, when someone is outside the U.S. and wants to create their business inside the U.S., what are some of the first steps that they should take to do that?
Sure. So one of the first things I do, and really any business owner should do, is really determine what the goals for the business are. Because in a lot of ways that will dictate what structure, what jurisdiction is really best for the business. So understanding your personal goals, how they relate to the business, whether you're going to be a high growth business, personal service, closely held small business, a Main Street business, figuring that out beforehand will really help dictate what path you take.
And you mentioned one of the things you mentioned was registering in a particular state. How do you determine which state to register your business in?
Sure. So really there's essentially three, for the most part, three different jurisdictions that you're going to look at. If you're here in New York, you're always going to look at the jurisdiction that you're physically in. So if you're here in New York, Delaware is probably the most common district, especially if you're a high growth business. We're going to probably recommend that you register in Delaware. And that just tends to be a more business friendly environment. There tends to be a bit more robust case law around business corporation law. And then the other option is potentially if you are going to be you working with an investor and going down sort of the investor finance path, the jurisdiction that your investor is going to be in. So if your lead investor is in Texas or Ohio, they may dictate that you end up registering in that state.
And what different kinds of companies can you register? What are the options?
Sure. So there are several types of businesses that exist that you could form. The two most common and what we typically see with cross-border transactions are LLCs or limited liability companies and corporations. Corporations can be S corps or C corps. Typically in a foreign national context, you're not going to be able to use an S corp, so you're really looking at a C corp or an LLC. There are various other entities, limited partnerships, benefit corporations, but typically the two that you're most focused on are corporations and limited liability companies.
Got it. And when you are creating that business, what are some of the basic documents that you need to create a business?
Sure. So for a corporation, you're going to have your certificate of incorporation. Depending on the state, there might be slight differences between that. You'll also have your bylaws, your shareholder agreements. You may have organizing resolutions. And that all basically gets done with the lawyers on the back end as you're filing. For a limited liability company, you're going to have your articles of organization, and then you'll have an operating agreement. And that operating agreement is essentially the agreement and contract that you and the partners decide is going to govern the operation of the business. And that could be a wide variety of things, right? How you're distributing profits and losses. What happens if somebody wants to leave the business? And then in New York, unlike a lot of other states, we actually have another requirement with LLCs called publication. And you actually have to put a public notice out there about the LLC's formation. And you do that for 6 weeks.
And so one of the important things, obviously, when you're creating a business is naming your business.
Sure.
So once you've chosen a name, what do you need to do, or how do you choose a name that's right for your business?
So really what you need to do, just when you're thinking of a name, right, and either do this by yourself before you talk to an attorney, or certainly once you've engaged an attorney, make sure they're doing it, is you want to go to the state jurisdiction Department of State website, and actually most of them have public databases that you can search. You want to make sure the name's available, because if it's not, they won't actually let you register the business under that name. Secondarily, you actually want to take it a step further and actually check the USPTO, and that's Patent and Trademark Office, because what you want to do is make sure that somebody isn't utilizing that name, maybe it's not their business name, but utilizing that name in a business context, and they have a trademark on it, which could potentially cause some infringement problems down the road. And then last but not least, Google it, check to see if the domain's available, make sure social media pages are available, because you want to be able to use those things as you develop a brand and build it, right? So.
And say you don't know what kind of business you want to start. What are some good ways to think about what is the right business for you to start?
So, I always say that, great ideas aren't enough, right? So you really have to think about where is there value that you can create that somebody else is willing to pay for. And a great idea is a dime a dozen. It really is. What matters is putting together a great team that has the ability to execute on that idea. And a great team with a mediocre idea is going to have a much more successful business than a great idea with a poor team. So at the end of the day, it's really focusing not so much on, I have this brilliant idea, but I have a great business model with a great team that people value that we can execute. And if you can identify that, and if it's something you enjoy, great. Some people just find a lot of enjoyment out of creating businesses and creating something like that. So, finding what that passion is and that works, and if you can align all that together, it can be a lot of fun.
And why would you hire a lawyer for this process? So does a lawyer add any value into creating a business, helping choose your name, helping find the right form of business?
Yeah, I mean, is there a chance that you could do this yourself and get it correct? Maybe, sure. But chances are, and certainly in my experience, 9 times out of 10, you're going to make a mistake doing this yourself. And, services like Rocket Lawyer or LegalZoom, they'll give you pieces of the puzzle, but they're not really helping you put those together. And you might be missing something. Chances are you're missing something. And you're not going to know that until it's time to probably correct it. And worst case scenario can actually be a much more existential mistake that requires thousands of dollars to fix, and potentially even threaten the viability of the business. So spend a little bit of money up front to help prevent a lot of problems down the road.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
We see common themes there in immigration of helping do it correctly the first time so that you can have it process as fast and smooth as possible.
Exactly.
That makes sense. And then lastly, I wanted to ask you about some of the pitfalls or challenges that you've seen startups have and some ways to address those. Any tips?
So when you're starting out a business, there really are a lot of challenges, and you don't know what you don't know, right? So it can be a minefield of issues to navigate. And one of the most common areas is probably around labor and employment matters. Especially in a jurisdiction like here in New York, we have unemployment insurance, workers' comp insurance, disability. Any one of those can actually trigger a significant amount of liability with the state. Making sure you're properly paying your employees the proper wages for minimum wage, exempt salaries, and then looking at the classification of independent contractors. Those are mistakes that young businesses typically make. There tends to be this notion that if you just call somebody an independent contractor, that will suffice and they don't have to pay them a W-2 wage. That obviously is not correct. It's a lot more complicated than that. It is a balancing test. And there are several factors that play into that, and chances are you're not classifying them properly. Intellectual property is also an area, making sure you're taking steps to protect not only your brand, your trademark, but actually patents on technologies, trade secrets. Looking at working with an accountant. One of the first things I say to a business early on is that you need a great accountant and you need a great lawyer. Whether you work with me or not, make sure you hire those two. And especially for a company that's going to be a cross-border transaction, you're likely going to need an accountant both in your home jurisdiction and here in the United States that can help you navigate what the tax consequences of the various business structures are and how that relates back to tax consequences in your home jurisdiction. So as we're putting together a team and helping them work through this, those are key components that often are missed.
So thank you again so much for joining us today. We really enjoyed it. And thank you to Matthew for joining us and sharing his knowledge about how to create a business in the United States with us. I think it'll be really great for our viewers and clients to be able to hear these important tips. Again, this is Kruger Immigration Law. I'm Julie Kruger, and you can find us on the web at www.krugerimmigrationlaw.com. You can email me at julie@krugerimmigrationlaw.com, or you can give me a call at 716-393-9878. Thanks again for joining us, and if you enjoyed this video, please subscribe. We release new videos every few weeks about immigration topics, that either current events or updates in the law or basic information about different types of visas. So we'd love to have you subscribe, and see you next time. Thanks.